Hi, everybody. We are going to get started in just a few minutes, so feel free to grab more to eat, get some coffee, waters, but we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hello again. Good morning. Hopefully everybody had a chance to top off their coffees, get some more water. It'll be available all day, so feel free to keep filling up as much as you want. But hi, everyone. My name is Allison Espandola. I'm the State Program Officer here at Coleridge. Really wonderful to see so many familiar faces here. Thank you so much for coming out, but also for all the new faces. It is so lovely to meet you in person and be able to have this time together. Again, welcome to Coleridge's 6th Annual National Conference, Data Beyond Borders. Before we really get kicked off, it is my absolute pleasure to do some housekeeping with you today. Always the best part. If you haven't already, please, we encourage you to download the app for this year's conference. We have the agenda on there, as well as speakers, fellow attendees. We'll also be sharing updates and information. You can go through and create your own personal agenda on there, where you can say, these are the sessions that I want to attend, so that you keep track of all of the information and the places and the people that you want to make sure that you're connected with this week. Also on there, there is a poll that we are encouraging you to take. So if you have not done the poll yet, please do the poll. That information is going to inform a session tomorrow that we are affectionately naming the Unconference Breakout, which is a participant-driven session. The actual name of it, though, in case you're wondering, is What's Top of Mind? Participant-Driven Conversations on Data, AI, and Policy Impact. So please make sure you take that poll, share your information, and your interest in that. The last little housekeeping item is we are, this year, virtually inviting participants. So we are live streaming some of our sessions, which we're very excited for those that can't travel. They have the opportunity to still participate. But for us here in this room, that means if you don't talk into a microphone, they don't hear you. So during Q&A sessions, there are microphones throughout the room. Please make sure that you talk into the microphone. Speakers as well. Please make sure you talk into those microphones so that we can capture that information that you are sharing and your insights, and that those joining us virtually will be able to as well. So with that, I do want to introduce to the stage Dr. Aho Yildirimaz, CEO and President of Coleridge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our 6th National Annual Conference, Data Beyond Borders, here in Arlington. It's wonderful to see you all here. And welcome to those who are joining virtually. And this is the first time, actually, as Allison mentioned, we're the first time we are live streaming this session. So we are even more excited about that. And whether you came from across town or across the country, we are so glad you made it up here, and we know that many of you, air travel was a little bit required, little extra patience this time, so thank you for making the trip. I hope everyone's trip went well. So the energy in this conference is already vibrant. Over the next few days, I hope we build on that together through conversation, collaboration, and shared learning. That's our goal for this conference. And as many of you know, we are really at a pivotal moment today. When we got together here last year, the world already felt uncertain. But over the past year, the landscape around us has shifted even more dramatically. Many of you have experienced, or many of us have experienced that directly, through changes in federal priorities, budget pressures, workforce reductions, shifting access to data, and in some cases, real uncertainty about what comes next. At the same time, we are living through another major transformation, the rapid rise of AI. If I don't mention AI in my speech today, I know I'm going to fail. So here we start with the AI story. the rapid rise of AI and the ways it's reshaping our work environment, how we work, how we analyze information, how decisions get made. So this is a pivotal moment in two ways. One way is it's all about what's happening in statistical and policy landscape, but it's also about what's happening in technology as AI changes the expectations, speed, and possibilities around data. So we're facing these two sides of the challenges, right? The environment is changing, the technology is adding up to that, it's accelerating that change. And don't get even me started about data and AI, the connection between those two. There is no useful data, there's no useful AI without data. So, right? If you want to have a useful AI, you must bring good data in it. So these shifts make really one thing clear. We need good data, and good data matters more than ever. What is good data? Good data is secure. Good data is trusted. Good data is connected. Good data is governed. Good data is usable, insightful, actionable. And most importantly, good data leads to better decisions and better outcomes. That's the work we all together must continue to build together. That's the mindset we bring to this conference. Let me start by recognizing our community. So this year, let me see, I'm doing the right thing. Should I click? I'll click. Yes. So this year we are joined by nearly 250 participants, both in person and for the first time, as we mentioned, virtually, as we are live streaming the sessions. We have attendees joining us from 40 states and territories, including as far away as Alaska and Guam. Participation from partner organization is up 35%. You can clap, Cynthia, we can actually. I saw her doing that. So participation from a partner organization is up 35%. Attendance from academic institutions this year is up more than doubled. We are particularly excited to welcome nonprofit partners working in areas such as community development and health and human services. These domains hold data that are essential to understanding the broader impact of education and employment policy change. So that's why that participation really make the landscape for our conference is different this year. We are also seeing stronger participation from Western states. We began building many of these relationships last fall at our first Western State Summit, and we are glad some of them are joining here today, this morning with us. In fact, Cami, the Commissioner of the Washington State Employment Security Department, will join our first plenary today to share her perspective and experience. We are also excited to welcome a group from Fairfax Public Schools. While we have had K-12 representation for several years at our conference, this marks the first time we are hosting such a large group from a local education agency. And thanks to our generous sponsors, we were able to offer complimentary registration to two groups: students and former federal employees affected by reduction in force. So we are grateful for that. The theme of this year's conference, Data Beyond Borders, captures something essential. Data is at the center of everything, including AI. But the impact comes from connected data, from linked data. Policy decisions drawn from linked data are clearer and more powerful when borders are crossed, both literal and figurative. That's the work we are building at Coleridge through Administrative Data Research Facility. But we are not building just a platform, we are building an interconnected ecosystem. Each linkage creates new insight, each collaboration expands what is possible, and each shared data helps build something scalable. And if you missed it, last month we announced a major grant from Ascendium. It will help us strengthen cross-state education to workforce data infrastructure. That investment comes in the right time. Demand for data-driven education and workforce strategies is growing. But many states still face challenges from technical, legal, and governance issues. And that makes it hard to link education and workforce systems across their agencies, and let alone across the state line. So this new initiative that we are starting with Ascendium, with your support, will help overcome those barriers. It will establish the infrastructure, agreements, applied learning models, and tools needed to build a regional multi-state integrated data system within Coleridge's ADRF. So that work is becoming even more urgent now because states are being encouraged to prepare now for workforce Pell implementation ahead of its July start. So we're going to connect with the states and see how we can actually help and accelerate their needs before the July start. We have already helped states bridge post-secondary and workforce outcomes across agencies and across state lines. Now, we're ready to take the next steps, scaling these connections across more programs, more agencies, and more states. This work is already taking a shape in New Jersey through the statewide data system, a secure, governed platform linking K-12, higher education, and workforce data all together. We are also launching work in West Virginia to link post-secondary education, workforce, and enhanced wage records. This project will build a foundation for even more complete, actionable evidence on education and workforce pathways. We also continue work on the prison education project funded by Ascendium. So drawing on data from our partners in Arkansas, we will conduct training later this year on linking corrections data with data on workforce outcomes. At the center of this evolution, it's Coleridge's ADRF, a trusted, neutral home for data, a secure foundation for linking, analyzing, and governing data responsibly. ADRF enables the collaboration at scale while maintaining the higher standards of privacy, security, and compliance. This is also where AI comes into the picture. As we all know, there's a great deal of attention on AI right now, and it's both from the promise perspective, but also from the potential disruption perspective as well. So at Coleridge, we are approaching this moment with clarity, caution, and purpose. We are integrating AI into the ADRF very cautiously with human oversight. We design it so that AI operates within controlled governance frameworks with the same privacy protections and the same trust that define our work. Our AI research assistant is helping researchers move more efficiently from question to insights. It supports code development, improves documentation, strengthens the clarity and consistency of analysis. At the same time, our AI export assistant is improving. One of the most critical parts of secure data is we export the outputs for release. It helps identify potential risks, apply policy consistently, and support more transparent, auditable decisions. The integration remains true to our core values. It's about building efficiencies for partners, enhancing productivity, supporting analysis, and accelerating insight, but without compromising trust. And importantly, we pay really very much attention on this. We keep people at the center when the AI is in our system. AI for us supports decision making. It does not replace it. So before I close, I want to thank our sponsors, partners, collaborators for their support and leadership. Many of you here at the room with us. We are grateful for many organizations helping make this work possible. And I, of course, want to also thank our team at the Coleridge and multi-state data collaborative teams. Their effort to bring this conference together to the life has been extraordinary, and their work advances our mission every day. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Raid Ghani. He's joining us virtually this morning due to a family matter last minute, and we are especially grateful that he could still be with us. So we did some change in the plan over the late last night, team, and we have him via Zoom this morning. Raid, one of our co-founders of Coleridge and former board member, is a distinguished career professor at Carnegie Mellon University, where he works at the intersection of machine learning and public policy. He is also the founder of the Data Science for Social Good Fellowship, which has trained practitioners from around the world to use data science to address real-world social challenges. What makes Raid's perspective especially valuable is that his work is grounded in practice. He has spent years partnering with government agencies to build and evaluate AI and technology systems in areas such as public health and human services, employment, and criminal justice. I'm looking forward to his talk and many others over the next few years. Thank you again for being here. Let's have a great conference, and let's dive into the data beyond borders. Thank you.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. And you can see my screen. Okay. I will get started. Thank you, Ahu, for the introduction, and I apologize for not being there in person. I know these talks over Zoom can be boring because you're sitting there looking at this screen, and it's morning. So I'm not going to bore you with slides. I'm just going to mostly talk about some of the work we've been doing and talk about some of the lessons we've learned, really. And I mean, it's interesting, right? Everything is AI now, so that's great for people like me who've been doing it for a long time. It's also really frustrating for people like me who've been doing it for a very long time because everybody now is an expert, and so you have to really figure out what they know, what they don't know, and how to help them move forward. And so what I want to talk through today is really, I'm not going to talk about the current state, right? The current state is at some level really promising, at other levels it's a disaster, right? The hype, since all of you are doing AI, because why else would you be there? Why else would you be anywhere if you're not doing AI? It's great for you all, right? Because you have infinite budgets now to do everything. You're getting. Just kidding, in case it wasn't obvious. Um, AI is going to fix all of our problems. It's going to fix poverty. That was one of the ones I saw recently, because poverty is just an engineering problem, and AI can fix all engineering problems. Um, but I think more practically, what I'm sort of, as a result of all the hype, and you all are in the middle of that, what I'm seeing is repeated pressure on all organizations, not just in industry and the private sector, and for you all, where you're supposed to do AI. It doesn't matter what the use case is. It doesn't matter if you're ready. It doesn't matter if you know what that means. But you're supposed to do AI. You're supposed to check the AI box. Companies, reasonable companies, are turning their mission statements into we're an AI first company, which doesn't mean anything. Um, it's also pretty scary for what I'm sort of seeing from a lot of people in the industry is a lot of performance evaluations for people are using ridiculous things like number of times you use an AI tool. And every time they use internal provided tools, it gets counted and logged. And end of the quarter, when they're having a review, they're like, you only use this 4 times a day. You need to use it more. So otherwise you're gonna get fired. Um, and so that hype is it's hype, but in practice it's affecting you all in terms of being pushed in some ways away from mission and into this shiny new object, right? At the same time, we're sort of seeing problems. Some of them, again, we can talk about why those problems are happening and how much of those problems are about the AI technology versus everything else around it. So, this was, I was reading a few days ago, that was a facial recognition problem, of and an old woman was arrested and held for several months, in a fraud case, and when it could have been cleared pretty quickly if people had just followed the regular investigation process, because there was evidence she never even was physically in. And that's sort of a higher intensity issue, but there's sort of less intense things like AI tools are making up locations people are going to. They're trying to buy tickets for places that don't exist. Um, and then if you go to the AI fails subreddit, you'll see hundreds of posts a day talking about things, obviously simple things that the system is getting wrong. And you all have experienced it, right? You've tried to use these tools and you sort of find them that they're useful, but they're also um, silly at times. And when they work and when they don't work is unpredictable. You can't tell before you try it. Um, and so it works out really well if you're an expert on something and you're using it, so you can verify everything and take the time. But if you don't know the answer to a question and you're trying to ask it, you can't necessarily trust it without spending um, a lot of time. And so this, there is kind of these headlines of both positives and negatives, but then on the ground, the impact, the actual societal and people impact, hasn't really happened yet, other than the jobs loss. But again, a lot of people are sort of saying the jobs loss was going to happen anyway. People were going to be laid off, and AI is giving companies a good excuse. But on the ground, what I'm seeing is a lot of projects start, but they don't continue. A lot of pilots happen, prototypes happen, but they're rarely put into production at scale. And then a lot of lawsuits coming up against the use of AI tools, whether they're in hiring and employment, or in all the content creation and review type cases, right? So so it's the tangible demonstrated impact of these tools. We're not really seeing that in the near term, and there are a lot of reasons why, and these are not all of them, right? It's the big reason is really that people are sort of doing things AI first, where the rest of the infrastructure doesn't exist. You're not ready for it. You don't have the data. You don't have governance. You don't have the buy-in of the people using it. You don't know what you're trying to do, what the goal is, what the values you're trying to achieve are, and that sort of ends up becoming a disaster, right? But I don't want to talk about the extremes, right? That's like we kind of understand the extremes right now, and I want to sort of talk about this middle ground, right? Which is where I think real impact is going to live. It's not going to be AI saving everything. It's not going to be AI. It will be a total disaster. If AI was useless and a total disaster, we would just stop doing it. At least in cases where we care about people and care about impact. And so we know we can improve things. And as I was sort of saying, we have to kind of improve things responsibly. Now, I don't know what responsibly means. There are a bunch of these buzzwords that have come up, and I run an initiative at Carnegie Mellon for responsible AI, but we don't really know what it means, because it is at this point a buzzword. And so what I want to sort of talk through is sort of talk about, what does this middle ground look like? How do we do it well? How do we do it when it has the impact that we want to have? Because you can have all sorts of undesired impacts, right? And so I'll give you a couple of examples of projects that are going on right now in our team, and then use that to ground some of the lessons we've learned over the last few years, because a lot of these extremes we're seeing aren't just about AI. They've been about a lot of these types of technologies that are using data and evidence to help people make decisions, whether it's machine learning, whether it's data science, all of those things. And so I want to give you a couple of examples of sort of recent ongoing projects. And so one project that's going on right now in where I'm based in Pittsburgh in Allegheny County is with the Human Services Agency, which is around homelessness prevention. And this is specifically focused on a very narrow decision point, which is when somebody is facing an eviction. You're renting a place that, for whatever reason, the landlord has filed an eviction. You're in an eviction case. There is rental assistance money that is available to help you pay your rent, and you have to apply for it. And the typical way that money gets allocated is there are a bunch of eligibility criteria. If you meet those criteria, it is first come, first serve. You call, there's a phone number, or you show up in this one particular office and you fill out an application. If you call early in the month, when there's money left, you get the money if you're eligible. If you call later, the money's run out for the month, too bad. You have to apply again next month and keep hoping that you get the resources you need that are available, that you're eligible for. That is not unlike a lot of other benefit programs we have, where it's up to the person who needs the help to figure out how to get the help, how to fill out the forms, where to go, what to do. And people who have more resources, people who understand the system are get that before people who may not. And so what ends up happening is that a lot of people who need this don't get in time, and end up homeless. So what the county wanted to do was to figure out, can we use this rental assistance money as a tool to prevent homelessness? Not just to stabilize somebody, but to make sure that to prioritize people who are become homeless, and to focus this money on the most vulnerable. The challenge was that this first come, first served model doesn't work when you're trying to prevent homelessness. And so what we worked with them on was use the data that's been collected, and that was sort of a big part of why this project worked. Was we had already a large investment in the data infrastructure that was linked across all the county data, across all the human services, all the benefits they're getting, courts data, eviction data, homeless HMIS data, connected that with employment data from the state, UI data a lot of you are familiar with, and use that to initially build a machine learning system that identifies, of the people facing eviction, who are the ones most likely to become homelessness, to be in need of homelessness services over the near future. That was part one, right? And that's, useful if all you want to know is who's going to become homeless. But that is not the point of this. That's the point is not to build an AI system that predicts homelessness. We've seen a lot of these types of things built and they don't do anything because prediction is a small part of the problem, right? Now what I can do if my model is really good is watch these people become homeless. That's not very useful to anyone. And so the second piece was trying to figure out what are the intervention points, right? What are the things that you can do? And in this case, the primary intervention point was offer them rental assistance. And so that system was designed. So what it does now is every week it generates this list of people who are high risk of becoming homeless that are currently facing an eviction, and it generates this list and splits those lists into the warmest touch that we have for this each person, right? So if they have interacted with supportive housing before, if they've interacted with child welfare system, interacted with if they're going to be in court, there's a team over there. And if we haven't had any interaction with them recently, it goes to this outreach team. That is the team that also does the intake for all the other rental assistance applications. And so they're used to this process. They get this outreach list, they call them and they tell them about the rental assistance program and help them start an application. So that's part number two, right? There is identifying people who might need the help. There is coming up with a program and a system that does the outreach. Now the step three is to try to figure out, well, does it actually work? Not whether this model is accurate at predicting homelessness, not whether people use it and like it. Those two things are nice, but that's not impact. Accuracy for a model is about the model. The outreach team liking the model, using the system is nice, but again, we want to sort of see, does this combined system, does this AI system plus this human outreach to offer rental assistance result in reduction in homelessness? And if it does, who does it work well for and who does it leave behind? And so for the last, it's a 16 months, we've been running a randomized control trial in the county where we generate this list and we randomize the list and we do outreach. And what we are fine. So right now we still have another 6-ish months to go to get more conclusive results, but the early results are showing surprisingly large reductions in homelessness as a result of this outreach attempts. So we're finding that we are actually reducing homelessness because of this combined system. And this reduction is primarily focused on people who are the highest risk of becoming homeless. So that's also great, because what often happens is people who are the highest risk at one of these things are also the hardest to change, that you need high intensity, expensive interventions. And this is relatively light touch. It's a phone call to start this process to kind of get to them. The biggest gap is really reachability. And again, if you've done any of this work, you know, getting to the people, having the right contact information is the hardest part. And that's part of the larger system, right? So that's kind of example number one. Example number two is very similar in a very different domain. This is work in Kansas we're doing with a couple of counties, Johnson and Douglas. And this is initially started off very much as, how do we prioritize mental health outreach to people who are at risk of getting booked into jail again? And we built the system and ran a trial again for a few years and showed reductions in jail booking rates as a result of targeted mental health outreach. And that system was deployed, and they wanted to kind of expand that to focus on reducing the impact of behavioral and mental health crises, suicides, overdose. And again, the idea was a lot of the times these teams that exist to help people, they're reactive. They wait until they get a referral. The referral might be from 911, they might be from police, they might be from emergency department, from a hospital. And at that point, their job is to sort of stabilize the situation. That they can't prevent too much of what's already happened. And so they came up with the same question is, can you help us figure out how do we be proactive with outreach resources that we have to provide people with mental health services that can reduce the impact of their crises. And in that case, what was sort of a challenge here is, again, a standard AI machine learning system maybe hey, let's predict who's going to be at risk. And again, that's useful. But as you start thinking about integrating into the workflow of the team that's doing the outreach, and you start talking to them about what they're doing, their decision points aren't as simple as give me a list and I'll deal with it. Their decision points are tell me who's going to need my help in the near future. Tell me the intensity of their problem. Is it going to be something that's more intense? Is it a suicide attempt? Is it self-harm? Is it something less intense? Tell me the urgency of that. Is this going to be the next few days, the next few weeks, the next few months? So I can figure out how to prioritize them based on this anticipated intensity and urgency. And then tell me what the workload is going to be to my caseworkers, if I assign them this person, because you want to load balance. You have a team of 15 people. You can't give the same person all the high intensity people. Um, Tell me how reachable are they? And so it's not just about spitting out these risk scores that a lot of these systems do. It's about supporting the process, supporting the workflow by giving them all of these different pieces. Um, and so that's the system we've been building for them. And that's soon kind of going to start getting into the same randomized controlled trial phase, to test, does this system, does the AI system plus the outreach team combine reduce the impact of these types of crises. So stepping back from these examples, I want to sort of talk through some of the lessons we've learned by doing 100 plus of these types of projects over the last, let's say, 10 years, 15 years. And what's different, what's going on sort of in this space, in the AI space, that's different is, that doesn't get talked about very much, is in all of these cases, we don't have a one size fits all system that we just buy. We don't just pay OpenAI $50 a month for a license and say problem solved, right? Or take an open source tool, install it, and be done with it. These systems are I'd say, unfortunately, right, not one size fits all. It requires a lot of custom design and tweaking based on the decision point. So the system that a lot of times you're going to see, oh, we have a system that predicts homelessness. Well, there is no such system that predicts homelessness. The system that we built was very much designed to take people who are facing an eviction and are going to be in the top 30 people every week who are likely to be homeless in the next 1 year, because that was the resource capacity of the team that was going to do outreach. If their capacity was 300 people, it would be a different system. If the capacity was 20, it would be a different system. If the intervention was not an outreach phone call for rental assistance, it would be a different system. If the pool of people incoming, the eligibility criteria wasn't facing an eviction, but it was any human service recipient, that would be a different system. Now that should alarm you, because that's a lot of work to build these different systems. But it turns out if you set them up right, it's not a lot of extra work, but it is a lot of deliberate, thoughtful design work up front, where you have to figure out the process, you have to map out the decision points, and then the changes in the technical system are really small, but they're significant. And so one thing to kind of keep in mind as you all sort of incorporate AI into different workflows and processes, it is not one size fits all, despite what you're hearing from the large companies, right? OpenAI and just the name of, and when you sort of see GPT, right? General purpose transformer. It is general purpose, and it's not. So just for those of you, one level deeper detail is ChatGPT is not a general purpose system. ChatGPT is based on this underlying model called GPT, right, which is general purpose. It's called general purpose. But what happens is that it doesn't know anything about chat interactions. And so that's the system underlying that's been trained on all the data that existed in the world. But then on top of that, to create ChatGPT, OpenAI hired a bunch of people to have chat interactions with this system. And that training on top of it is what made the system be a chatbot. It wasn't, GPT doesn't know anything about chat, about interactions. It just spits out words. And so there's a custom piece that happened that is not trivial and it's not cheap. And it's always ongoing, right? And so that's something to keep in mind. The second piece is just for setting to the baseline expectations, right? Is a lot of these AI systems, they generally do what you tell them to do, which is reassuring because if we tell them the right thing, they're likely to do the right thing. The problem is telling them what to do is not how to tell them what to do isn't always obvious. We can tell them in lots of different ways, and they're not very easily auditable or exposable. You tell them what to do by the data you give them. But that's not the only way. You can override the data. You tell them what to do by saying, look, when you try to do something with this data, you're going to make mistakes. Each mistake is going to be worth a different cost, and each correct thing you do is going to be worth a different reward. And so you define this reward system and the cost penalty system. And generally, those are the two ways you tell the system what to do. But both of those two ways are decisions that are being made by technical people, developers, that aren't thinking of them as um, belonging to the domain or belonging to the value system or the policy. They're thinking about it as, oh, it's just a technical choice. We're going to pick something. Just treat every mistake equally. Doesn't really matter. Well, that's then what causes a lot of these bias issues is because they're saying, well, it doesn't matter what you get wrong. It's equal. So if your data is majority of one type, you want to make sure you get the majority right because because the developer told you every mistake is going to be equally penalized. So let's make fewer mistakes, which means get things right for the majority, right? A lot of these things make sense once you start understanding what's going on underneath. The second thing is, and this is becoming much more common with the new generative AI tools, is they do what you tell them to do, but they don't necessarily do what you meant them to do. We aren't great at being explicit and detailed and at defining specs. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at a workshop where talking to a lot of people who are building software at large companies, and a lot of them sort of said, "Well, I haven't looked at code in months. I tell Claude Code what I want to generate. It generates it. I then tell it to generate test cases, and so it generates test cases. It checks itself, and we ship it out." That's scary, right? Because that's assuming that we are really, really, really good at telling our needs explicitly in a spec way that the system can do, and that's not true. We've always had trouble doing that. That scoping and discovery piece is often the hardest piece of a project. But you need iterations, you need back and forth, you need different viewpoints, and so I think those two things kind of as the backdrop, want to kind of go into some ways to deal with those issues, right? How do we get the impact we need to have while dealing with the technology constraints that we have? So the biggest thing that I have sort of, and a lot of these things are going to be obvious. You know them, but your bosses are ignoring them, and so hopefully this is more uh, reassuring for you and gives you more things to go back and say, see, I was telling you this. It's not just us, it's everybody else who's saying the same thing, and I'm hearing these things repeatedly, right? And so we all want to be data driven. It's wonderful to be data driven, and data is great, but data is bad. Data is always bad. It doesn't matter. I shouldn't be saying it at this event because but again, it's not. We're not here because of data. We're here because of impact, and data is a good tool to get to impact. It's a better tool than a lot of other tools we've seen, but it is a tool. And so instead of being kind of data driven, right, we kind of have to be action and intervention driven. And what I mean with that is, again, this is something I say a lot is, and some of you are going to get a little upset by that. Like, you've all built dashboards, probably, or have teams that built dashboards. They're useless, right? Because unless there's an action, well, there's one use. They stop your boss from asking about how are we doing, right? So you're sort of minimizing that overhead for yourself, but the actual impact is pretty minimal because most people don't take actions based on dashboards. You look at them, you admire them, they look cool, they look pretty. Um, but what is the action that this tool that you're trying to build, the AI tool, what is the action it's informing? What's the decision it's supporting, right? So in the homelessness case, it's not building a big dashboard that's telling you who's going to be homeless. And it's the actual action is we're giving a list to this person who is making a phone call. And so that action is literally in a spreadsheet. The output is a spreadsheet where there's this phone number and history of this person. It's supporting the outreach worker to call and offer them rental assistance. It's helping them look up their prior information, check for eligibility, check if anything is in process. And so the action is this outreach for rental assistance. It's not rental assistance, and it's not um, a dashboard. It is outreach. And same in the mental health case. In other cases, it might be connection to an assistance program. It might be an after-school program. In other projects we've done, there was a project we did many years ago around lead poisoning. It's like 10, 12 years ago in Chicago. And the action there was a lead hazard inspection. Uh, the, the the idea was to prevent lead poisoning in children, but you can't just prevent lead poisoning in children by doing something to the child. The because the source is lead in the house, you have to remove that lead source. And to find out if there is lead, you need to do an inspection. So that was the action. And so very much from the very beginning, when working on a project, we sort of start identifying what are the actions you're going to change. If you don't have an action, don't do AI. It's not worth it. It's too expensive, too much work, waste of time. Start figuring out the intervention, the policies. The good thing is a lot of us, a lot of you all in different agencies have programs and policies and interventions in place. And so start a project around that intervention. Say this intervention exists. It's not given to the right people. It's too late. It's not allocated correctly. Can AI help me improve its allocation so that I can have better impact? Right? Number two, again, you all are here, which means you like metrics. If you like data, you like metrics, right? And metrics are wonderful. But metrics we all know can also be misleading, right? And it takes, and people can be, if metrics are not the right metrics, people get start optimizing for the metrics. And we've all seen sort of the volume metrics, right? Like we sort of see I work on homelessness a lot, and so I'll hear metrics like we have 90% bed utilization in our homeless shelter. Well, that's, I don't know if that's good or bad. I can just send more. You can just go and recruit more people to come into your homeless shelter, and you increase that number, or we just reduce the beds. Just put one bed there, and then you'll have 100% utilization if that's the metric. Or we had 600 people go through our programs. That's great, but how many of them needed that program? And how many did you miss who actually needed it? How did you misallocate? Or I see education programs saying, high school support programs saying 99% of our people who go through our program go to college. Well, that's great, but how many would have gone to college otherwise? Maybe all of them would have gone to college, and you actually hurt their chances. Not always, not necessarily true. I'm often exaggerating to kind of make that point, but we often measure what's easy to measure, and it's harder to measure the long-term counterfactual. It's harder to measure what would have happened if the system didn't exist. But that's what we're trying to get to. And so in the case of kind of the homelessness example, right, is what we're trying to measure is reduction in homelessness. But most of these AI systems are going to tell you accuracy of the model. And so for each AI model that exists, there are benchmarks that they're tested on. Each benchmark comes with certain metrics. And a lot of the times when organizations today are making procurement decisions, they're looking at these benchmarks and think, oh, this model is the best. And so you should use that. Well, it's the best at accuracy. It's not the so you need it to be accurate, but it's kind of, there's no point if it's not usable, right? So you kind of want to go through this flow and say, how good, in the case of the homelessness rental assistant example I was giving, we initially measured how well can this system identify future homelessness. Step number two was um, uh, the users in the middle, the people who are doing the outreach, when they get input from the system, output from the system, um, what happens to them? Do they use it? Do they agree with it? Do they disagree with it? Has it helped them reach the right people? That's okay. That's great. Number three is the combined thing, the better identification of homelessness plus better use of this system by the outreach workers. Does that lead to reduction in homelessness? And if that was your only goal, you can have your metric of reduction in homelessness, right? But that's not always the only goal. The other goals might be you might have disparities in homelessness across different types of people. Um, does this system reduce that disparity? And you can sort of hand wave and talk about it, or you can put it as a metric, which is you can define the disparity between groups and say, that's my primary metric. I don't care about overall reduction. I care about reducing the disparity. Because the system that reduces disparity may be a very different system to design than the system that reduces overall homelessness rates. And it depends on your policy need. And so defining the right metrics, um, even if you can't get to them tomorrow, means that you kind of keep, you kind of have this longer term metric and a near term and a medium term. And so you have a flow of at different stages. But because if you just focus on the immediate one, you forget the larger, the longer term real goals, even though it's always in our, we talk about efficiency as a goal, but efficiency by itself can lead to huge inequity. So kind of thinking about, it's not just about allocating resource to people who need it, but it's also about allocating resource to people for whom you can change the outcome. Maybe you can identify people who are going to become homeless, but maybe this intervention isn't useful for those people, so it doesn't change homelessness. Or it's useful, but it's only useful for people who understand the system, and know how to do all these things and have access to the resources. In which case, it increases inequity. So we kind of have to build those outcomes in as metrics. Right? This is something that's becoming much more common than it used to be, because AI tools are getting cheaper to at least play with. Right? Again, as I said, you can play with ChatGPT for free, or you can pay $30-50 a month if you're an agency, and check the AI box. Right? And have a press release. So the mayor or the county manager or the governor can have a press release that says, we are the first in the nation to do X with AI. And it'll probably be true. We're the first in the nation to do this, because again, you're all trying to do new things now. And the playing is fine. It builds comfort. It builds familiarity. But that doesn't mean it's the same as evaluation. At least in my experience, as I've worked with different states, I'm seeing very little true evaluation. And for me, what I'm sort of, my hypothesis is that, governors' attention spans are short, right? And so once the press release comes out, the buy-in kind of goes away, or the attention and goes away. So once you've kind of done the initial pilot prototype, and say, hey, we're playing with this, you need then larger investment to actually make sure that you run a rigorous evaluation, that you show the impact on productivity, on human outcomes, on the people who live there, and on the services you provide. And that requires much more work and effort and investment and infrastructure. And people have sort of lost interest because the press release has already happened. And I think that's where we need to really push for is not rely on some of these early, so I'll give you an example. I think I won't name the governor or the state, but there was a state that was doing a pilot with OpenAI. And what they did was they got a bunch of licenses, about 150 licenses of ChatGPT. They asked people who would be interested in using them. They gave it to people. They let them use for a few months. And then they did a survey. And the survey said, did you use it? Did you like it? And did you think it saved you time? And guess what? 80 something, there was a press release that says 88% of the people who were given this said they liked it. And they saved an average of 6 hours a week or something like that. Success. Problem solved. AI is helping the state deliver better services through responsible design and all the buzzwords, right? There's zero evidence of that. But worse, there's no follow through on that. That was the end. And so those can be good starting points, but those cannot be ending points. And the question is, how do we as the people in the middle who are often running these types of pilots set them up right, so that the metrics are not, how did you feel about this? The metrics are more about what impact did it have? And if you don't have in 3 months the impact numbers, then the pilot is not done. And so you kind of have to build it into that from the very beginning, when that attention is still there. This is obvious. You all are here because you care about integrating the data from different sources. And AI isn't gonna take away that problem. It can help. That's one of the more promising use cases, is how can we do better data integration? But it's not just about integrating data. So the example I was giving again on both the mental health, behavioral health side, as well as the homelessness side, as well as most of our projects, the big reason that they end up working and having impact is because those cities and counties and states did the upfront work of investing in a linked data infrastructure. You can't really solve any problem by just looking at administrative data from that one source. At a minimum, in order to evaluate, you want to you need data from other sources. If you're trying to figure out, if you're trying to prevent homelessness, you might not necessarily have information on people about their other services that they're getting. You want to look at, are they consuming more or less mental health services? You want to look at criminal justice outcomes. You want to look at education outcomes. You want to look at, SNAP and TANF. You want to look at, if they're getting other services. You want to try to integrate their other, emergency medical response, medical services data. And so in every single project that we've done in the past 15 years, without that linked data infrastructure, you couldn't have built the system and you couldn't have evaluated. In fact, actually, in some of these cases, these projects were iterative projects where the first iteration, we find that we can't really do much with the data we have. And that gives the agencies the incentive and the mandate was to go back and say, we need to build more data agreements with our other agencies in the region or across county and state boundaries to collect that data, to connect that data and bring that back in. And that's what shows us improvements, right? So I think with the new AI tools, even when these tools are really helpful in building things for you, where you don't necessarily need data to build something, the burden is all pushed off to evaluation. You still need to evaluate using data. Whether you're building, you can, let's say you're trying to figure out who's gonna need unemployment insurance in my state in the next 6 months. You might be able to ask ChatGPT that question, given some data, but you still need to evaluate whether the answer is correct or not. And so a lot of the work that's going to happen is really much more on the evaluation side. Even if we think that building these systems has become easier, writing the code has become easier, data integration has become easier, the evaluation hasn't gotten any easier, and it still requires a good data infrastructure to be able to do that. But it also requires a lot of these things, as you connect them to services, it requires your service channels to be connected, right? Anything you're doing online, you're doing offline, you're doing phone, in person, they all need to be connected, and they often live in silos, just like data does. And so connecting these different, again, the example that I was giving on the homelessness side, it's not just this one outreach team making phone calls. It's the person with the team with the most recent contact with the person we're trying to reach, to get them to be the most familiar. It's trying to figure out which is the right channel. Another project we were doing, in Pennsylvania was around identifying people who are eligible for SNAP benefits but are not enrolled, and then trying to do outreach again to connect them. And that's again where outreach, who does the outreach and how the outreach is done, is is as important, not more important than who it's being done to. Right? Identification is a problem of who is eligible, not enrolled, but getting to them and persuading them is, and then helping them go through that process is equally important, if not more important. Yeah, this should also be obvious, right? It's often, again, the way we think about ChatGPT and Claude, and depends on what you're using. If you're using the chatbot version, right, it's sort of a sitting on the side. Like you go out of your workflow to do something, you then copy and paste it back. And a lot of these companies have learned, and they're embedding these into the workflow, not necessarily, that well, but whether it's Google Slides or PowerPoint, things like that. What is the equivalent for, again, for us? It's embedding these tools into the workflow so people don't go out of their way. If you're doing inspections, it's just the same inspection tool and the same layout and the same formatting. It's just the back end is now powered by this, by a system that prioritizes based on need or risk. If you're doing, again, this outreach for rental assistance, if you're doing outreach for mental health, you still get the same type of things. Instead of just getting historical data about somebody, you're sort of saying, and this person is going to likely to face a high intensity mental health, high severity mental health event within the next week. They'll have a medium workload, caseload, and they are reachable best through in-person, outreach. That's their existing workflow. We've just kind of made a tiny tweak where it's now supported. The back end is now being populated by an AI tool instead of a manual human. But that's the way to kind of make sure that people actually use it. Otherwise, it's a tool sitting on the side that we've all seen nobody uses. The part that's often harder is embedding talent, right? Because again, some of you are probably from IT teams and data teams. Some of you are from policy and program teams, and there's always this tension of where every policy program team wants to kind of own their own data people and IT people, and a lot of organizations want to centralize that because it makes more sense from an efficiency point of view, and it's tricky because both models have worked. But you kind of ideally want the data and IT people to understand the programs and the policies. There are too many government agencies where you have the IT and data teams that have no clue about the programs they're supporting and the policy programs and the interventions. And so they don't understand how the data is generated. They don't understand that. They're just like, it's just a database. I'm just doing linkage and I'm giving it to you. Don't ask me about anything else. And that is usually a disaster because that lack of context really hurts the overall program. But each program can't always have their own people, and so some places have sort of centralized but have dedicated liaisons. Some programs have kind of have people where you have people spread out, but they also have a virtual connection, so they have a support group and they have a community as opposed to being separated. But I think having the data analytics, AI, machine learning people that understand the problems, the policy problems, and has, in my experience, have worked so much better, because once they start understanding them, they become, they become better participants in the whole process. They're better stakeholders, as opposed to, I'm just controlling the server and the data. I don't really care what you do with it. Okay, maybe. Well, okay, so I'm just gonna skip this first, but sometimes I sort of see over reliance on data when you don't have the right data, and so knowing what the data has and what the data doesn't have, right, and you only have the data that you collect, right, whether it's administrative or survey, if you didn't provide a service to somebody, you can't assume that they didn't need that service, and we know that this happened a lot during COVID, where um, in many ways, it's kind of bubbled up a lot. We've always known these things. People who work on surveys know everything about sort of responding bias and sample bias, but in COVID, it kind of came out very obviously, where we were sort of seeing COVID rates, right? Like what's the prevalence, and those numbers were based on people who were being tested, not actual COVID prevalence rates. And so that was often biased because older people were more symptomatic, so they were getting tested more often. Older people were higher risk, they were getting tested more often. So communities with more younger people, even though they might have had a higher prevalence, we wouldn't know that because they weren't being tested. Well, that's obvious. Again, a lot of you probably work with unemployment data. Um, During COVID, UI data was being considered as almost ground truth for who was actually unemployed. We know that this is only for the formal job sector. It's only W-2, and it misses, self-employed and small businesses. But a lot of states were kind of the people running these systems knew that, but the decisions that were being made at kind of the governor's office level were ignoring that, and we're kind of looking at state unemployment from the lens of this UI data because that's what we have. That's easily accessible. Every state has it. It's in a accessible format, and so you can just sort of say, well, tell me how many people are unemployed, and do all sorts of resource allocation around it. But that was disproportionately missing certain types of people who needed more support. And so knowing the limits of the data is as important as sort of using data. And this happens in many other contexts. I many years ago, I used to do political things, and one of the things that happens in a lot of political data is that the most important day is election day, right? And one of the challenges with election data is you don't know on election day voting what time somebody voted. You don't get that data. You get somebody voted on this day, but you don't know what time they voted. So if it's 4 p.m. and your predictions were you had these people that were supposed to vote and they haven't voted yet, do you panic and say, shit, all my things are wrong, we're gonna lose? Or do you wait because maybe they're gonna vote at the end of the day because that's when they normally vote, but you don't have, because your data doesn't have the timestamp, you don't know that information, so you can't use it to figure out how are we doing so far. And so using that data to calm people and saying we don't know this, there's no conclusion, there's no information, it's not good or bad, it's just what is. Those are the type of things that people who have kind of deep understanding of the limits of their data, they're able to do, right? Governance, we've kind of already talked a lot about some of these things, right? It's not about the model, but it's the system, and the system is often the entire workflow. And so when we're putting in governance in place, we often sort of over focus on the AI governance piece, whereas this overall system governance is what we care about. And the examples that I wanted to remind myself to give is, again, this lead poisoning case, the project we were doing. The AI model predicted kids who were going to homes that have kids that were at risk of lead poisoning. That was then given to a set of people who would make phone calls to do outreach to get to schedule a lead hazard inspection. And one of the things was those inspections, turns out that it was only getting inspections in certain areas, and so when we dug into it, turns out those calls were being made in English. And so obviously when somebody who picks up the phone doesn't speak English, they weren't scheduling those inspections. And so the model was not the problem. The outreach medium was the problem, and kind of governance on the whole thing was able to identify the gap and then fix that. And so that's kind of important, is not just limiting it to AI because you lose sort of the overall thing. The another piece, sort of, I'm going to go through some of these quickly because they're not that deep. We often look for sort of in these types of things, compare them to perfection versus status quo. So one of the nice things about AI is if you're going to compare it to status quo, then you have to baseline your status quo. You have to kind of do the work of saying, how well are we doing today at this? Measure that, put it in place, and then measure lift. It seems obvious, but that's kind of where I get a lot of when I talk to people in criminal justice. I sort of hear a lot of skepticism around AI, and and some of it rightly. Um, my usual question there is, well, tell me, how well do your judges do today? Like what how are they doing? And they look at me like, what do you mean, how are they doing? Like, well, what's your success metric for your judges? What's their performance metric? And let's compare the AI system on the same metric. And as you all know, I mean, that we don't have those. We don't evaluate uh, a lot of those existing human processes. And that's not to say we shouldn't evaluate AI. We should definitely evaluate AI. But I think we need to put evaluation metrics on the overall process, because then we can baseline it and then say, okay, if you insert AI in the middle, does it improve, or does it degrade the overall process? This is another thing that I see more and more often is whenever sort of risks of AI come up, the checkbox that companies, vendors often offer is, oh, don't worry, there's a human in the loop. And that means it's fine. And that's basically the safety check of this system is safe to use because there's a human in the loop. The human in the loop is important and can be useful, but there have been several studies that have shown the human in the loop can be worse than just the human and just the AI system. And so inserting a human in front of an AI system can be worse. And so that's something to keep in mind as you start. And it's because the human is not trained or used to being in the loop. The human, if it's the same human that used to do that job, they're used to doing it. They're not used to being in the loop. And so this is something that the consumer example of this people complain about all the time is self-driving cars. If you're sitting there in the driver's seat and even in the loop, if the car all of a sudden decides that it needs your help and you're napping, you have a microsecond, a millisecond, or second to react. You're not ready for that. You're not trained for that. You don't have the tools for that. And so it needs to give you enough heads up, enough early warning, and tell you what to do. And so you have to kind of change the process if the human in the loop has to work. Um, and there have been repeated examples where we've done experiments where we've found that humans end up being pretty bad at being in the loop, or they become different. So we need to kind of have the training in place. And especially one of the things I recently have been seeing is a lot of mental health chatbots, and some of these services that are coming out. So one of the examples is a tool that was talking to someone recently. This company has this tool for support for doing mental health counseling in high school students, because their business case is we don't have a lot of rural schools don't have enough resources to have counselors. This tool is cheaper, so we can put it in place, and we have these people who are sitting remotely, virtually monitoring the chat, so that if something goes wrong, they can intervene. But now this one person is monitoring 30, 40 different chats. I don't know if there's been no evaluation. Are they capable of doing it? Is it better than not having that? I don't know if it's better or worse, but we need those types of evaluations to make sure that the humans in the loop are actually improving the system rather than providing a checkbox. Okay, I'm gonna skip this. Ethics important, but not just the word and the conversations, but for me, a lot of the ethical choices that we make get embedded into code in these AI systems. And so we want to make sure that those are exposed, they are auditable, because they're technical decisions that are being made, but they're actually value decisions. They are ethical decisions. The success metric, right? If the metric was reduction in overall homelessness, you've just prioritized overall effectiveness over equity. If the metric was reduction in disparity between first-time homeless and repeat homelessness, reduction in disparity between um, racial gaps in homelessness reduction. Now you've kind of taken an ethical choice, a value choice, and made it into a technical choice that the system is optimizing for. And I think that's the piece that we need to focus more on. And all of this is really controlled through procurement, right? If you're not building your own system, you're often buying from vendors. The procurement process is often wrong and doesn't have all these things because you don't have the tools and the resources and the trainings. The people, the teams doing procurement don't have this training to do this well, and don't have the support and don't have the resources. So I think that part is the one that we need to get right. So I'm gonna just basically, I think this is kind of my last, actual content slide, which is how do we get started, right? How do we do this right? And this flow is not different than what you've been doing before with data, right? Which is for any project, define the outcomes. Not outcomes that are kind of internal, but outcomes that are societal policy goals, right? What is the goal? Is it improved employment? Is it improved educational outcomes? Is it reduction in disparity in educational achievement or employment or economic development? Figure out what interventions you can change. What are the programs? What are the actions you can take? Figure out the data infrastructure. Co-design with all the different people involved, and then embed evaluation throughout, as opposed to kind of doing it at the very end. Do it in chunks, do it iteratively, and embedding kind of ethics and governance throughout. You can spend a lot more time on this, but I sort of go through. Okay, so those are kind of, in my mind, that of all the things we talked about, kind of the big takeaways, right? Is don't get distracted by accuracy and benchmark claims. Kind of think about outcomes. We need good data, and we need good governance. Those are not optional. Those are kind of necessary conditions to even start doing this work. Problem first and not AI first. That's easier sort of said than done today. And so maybe co-lead with both. And then because procurement is so important, developing a procurement process that's effective, that having templates for that, having resources to evaluate existing systems, and most important to me, asking for meaningful transparency from vendors. When you get something, they'll sort of tell you different types of transparency. They might even sort of say, here's the source code. You actually want meaningful transparency, because that's not just the source code. It's saying all of these ethical value choices that have been made in the system, these hundreds of them, tell me what those are. Tell me where they are hidden in the technical code. And I want to have them separate. I want to have policy conversations around those, and I will set them the way I want them to. I don't want to be embedded, hidden inside code in millions of lines. And that's the risk of having a lot of these coding tools auto-generate things, because they'll hide them inside. And so you can tune them to sort of extract them out of it and say, put them in a different place so I can actually start talking about those in a meaningful way. And that's one way to kind of do that through an effective procurement process. Okay, I will stop. I know I've said a lot of words. Hopefully some of them were useful. I know I'm not there, but I'm happy to. I don't think we have. If we have time, I'm happy to sort of answer questions now. It's going to be an awkward format, but please email me if you have any questions. If you want to collaborate, if you want to work on any of these types of things, we do a lot of work with governments, and so email me if you want to talk more, or if you want to feedback or talk through any of the things you're working on. You can use help with. And thank you. And sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Well, thanks, Raid, for those really wonderful practical insights. To build on the keynote that we just heard from him, we are going to move into our first opening plenary, really looking at more of the real-world impact that as the panelists come up to the stage, these are some practitioners that are very close to the work. This will explore the federal landscape, pressures shaping the evidence ecosystem, and how AI is changing expectations, workflows, and outcomes. We are excited to have Mark Zandi moderating this session. So with that, I will turn it over to him and we will dive right in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's very good to be with you. Was it a year ago that I was here? How many people were here a year ago? Anyone remember what I said? I think I got it right. I must have gotten it right. No? Pardon me? Was it bad news? That's all you remember is the bad news? Yeah. Well, there you go. You know what? She's better than AI. Hell yeah. I don't know. It made me a little nervous about being a human in an AI loop. I don't know. I don't want that job. That'd be pretty tough. But it's good to be with you. We have a great panel, star-studded. We got Cami Feek from Washington State. Cami is the commissioner of the Employment Security Department there. And I was reading a little bit of your bio. I won't go into any detail, but just to get you to know the folks here. You've been in that department for almost a decade now. Is that right?
We're getting close,
Yeah. And you're responsible for the UI program, the unemployment insurance program.
Yeah, we have unemployment insurance, paid family medical leave, reemployment services, all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah, great. And of course, Coleridge does a lot of work with UI data. That's a big part of the work that we do. And we got David Wilcox. David is, I didn't know, I knew you were at Peterson. I didn't know you're the director of U.S. economic research at Bloomberg. Is that right? Were you the one who said 100% probability of recession 3 years ago? Was that you? I couldn't have been you. It was before your time.
It was not I. Believer in uncertainty.
Yeah.
100% is wrong in a weather forecast and wrong in an economic forecast.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Of all the people I know, you would be the last person on the planet to say 100% anything. That's definitely for sure. And David was...
Sounds to me like 100. I'd be the last person. That's wrong too.
Okay, there you go. There you go too. Good point. Good point. David was also director of economic research at the Fed for many years. Worked with many Fed chairs over the years, and obviously has a keen insight into the nexus between economic data and policy making. And I didn't know you were also in the Treasury, Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy. That's like the chief economist of at least that's my sense of it, of the Treasury Department. Was that under President Bush? Who's that under?
Second Clinton administration.
Second Clinton administration. And then Chris Kurz. Chris is at the Fed. You can see he's dressed in black. So, a little, not quite as transparent as David over here, but we'll try to get him to speak a little bit about how he uses data. Actually, Chris Ahu and I go way back with the ADP data, the use of the ADP data for coming up with employment estimates, and got to know each other quite well. We have a great group and a lot to talk about. I think more of an open-ended question to begin with. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about economic data, both in terms of the quality of that data and the timeliness of the data. And I just want to get your sense of how, I should say, and I was talking to David earlier about this, Michael Bloomberg, your boss, just penned a op-ed on this issue. I think it appeared today, or maybe it was yesterday, talking about the quality of data and timeliness. How big a deal is it? Is it a very serious problem? How should we view it? And also in the context of, obviously we're here thinking about economic data in the context of policymakers and their use of it. And the Fed obviously is no institution uses data more intensively and relies on it more heavily than the Federal Reserve Board. So, very key. So maybe I'll just start here, David, with you. What do you think? How big a deal is it?
So I'm curious, is some AI system controlling the microphone, or do I have to turn it on?
Can you hear him? You can hear him.
Great.
Okay.
about this? How about this? And actually, anybody who wants to stand, you've been sitting for a long time. Why don't you stand up? And I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I might come down and make you uncomfortable by standing among you. But this topic gives me too much energy to sit down. Mark asked how much reason is there for concern. I think there's tremendous reason for concern. I want to disentangle two ideas, though, in this area. And I'm going to speak specifically to the federal situation because that's what I know, and I realize that in doing that, to some extent, I'm speaking past you because to a large extent, I believe you're from state systems. But the same concept applies, and that, am I already out of time?
Time's up.
Wow, I had to be a little more brief than I thought.
Usually that's me that gets.
The same concept applies, and that is a distinction between reality and perception and trust. At the federal level, my strong conviction is, despite the fact that there's been an awful lot of yammering, particularly in the past 10 days or 2 weeks, that maybe the federal statistical system has been compromised. I've looked into it very deeply in a way that only a serious data nerd with an obsessive compulsive problem could do, and I'm totally convinced there's not a substantive problem. There are some issues of perception and trust, and those are really important. We need to be careful about that. Here's where you come in. I think issues of perception and trust stem from a lot of rather intangible factors. How well do you communicate? Do you communicate the rationale for the decisions that you've made? Do you have a playbook that you can reference and say, this is the reason why I made the decision that I made? Here's the algorithm that I laid out beforehand. Did I actually follow the algorithm that I laid out beforehand? Do I need to modify the algorithm, which is perfectly valid and fair to do, even on the fly, but did I communicate to my users in real time that I was modifying the algorithm, the playbook, the handbook, in order to explain in a way that would be comprehensible to your audience, and perhaps a broader one, the public, the taxpayers? What exactly was the motivation for the actions that you took? Trust and perception are incredibly important. One of the reasons why so many people have the view that the federal statistical system is under threat is because response rates are down. Nobody's really quite sure why response rates are down to surveys as severely as they are, but one of the key reasons has to be trust. How will the data be used? Will it be used for the intended purpose? Can I rely that it won't be used for some other purpose for which it was not originally collected? Your integrity in handling the information that you gather, in the way that you communicate about it, will pay off in dividends in the future in terms of your ability and your successor's ability to collect that information. So a starting idea I wanted to leave you with is that your conduct matters for the success of your statistical enterprise.
I failed to mention the most important thing about David's bio. He's a board member of Coleridge. He's a recent board member. And I'm just trying to remember how long I've been a board member now. 3 years? Maybe three years? Yeah, so that's good. Let me, so my take when you just said, David, was that yes, we need to be concerned, I don't know if that's the right word you would use, but vigilant with regard to the quality and timeliness of economic data, but nobody, at least based on your deep research, has put their finger on kind of the data scale here? You just don't see that in anything that you're observing.
I would put it more strongly. There is no evidence that I'm aware of, and I've looked into it as thoroughly as I possibly can, of any compromise, any decision that was made by reason of political pressure, either anticipated or actual, that have caused any of the data coming out from the key flagship federal agencies to be distorted relative to what would have happened a dozen years ago.
And is there anything that we can and should be looking at to gauge whether that continues to be true as we go forward in time here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are whole armies of specialists who care deeply about this information and parse into Table 6D, line 37, and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I was expecting. That kind of auditing by specialists who know every nook and cranny of the data, that is one key guardrail against manipulation. A second key guardrail is I know many of the people in these agencies. I have incredible regard for their dedication as civil servants to the enterprise. They understand the importance of the role that they play. The surest signal that we will have of political manipulation is there will be mass resignations. There will be leaks from the inside. I am 100, I said I never say 100%.
Did you see that?
99.9.
No. In this case, I make an exception. I am 100% certain there will be resignations, there will be leaks. It will be impossible to keep it a secret. And guess what? The silence on that front has been deafening thus far. And so that's ultimately what gives me complete confidence that there hasn't been any manipulation thus far. It's most, honestly, the first line of defense is I know the character of the people who were leading these agencies, and it's inconceivable to me.
So, Cami, what do you think? How big a deal is the issues around economic data, the quality of the data, the timeliness of data? What do you think?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And I'm not going to stand up because it exhausts me. I don't have the same energy. No, I'm just kidding. So at the state level, we've been dealing with what I think is less about the quality of data and more about how things are being said and the sort of press releases and information around it that cause a lot of question, and some early actions on changing some key positions when, or statements about numbers being adjusted when in our system, like those adjustments are normal things that sort of cause doubt and question that I think, to amplify, David, I agree with you completely, what our state's been spending a lot of time on is really getting our Washingtonians to understand why they can actually trust information, why they can trust us. We have done things like we do an economic video now monthly when those numbers come out with our chief economists, and we're translating that out to our regional economists across the state so that they can lend that credibility around this work that they're doing. It is problematic that we're getting less responses, and I think where we're at is trying to help our employers and others understand why responses to those surveys are so important, why it matters, and what that means to the economic system and the information that we're able to put out. I think it's kind of fun going after David. The thing that I was going to bring up is that there are people everywhere looking at this data more thoroughly than they ever have, including our state teams. And I think your point about not finding anything is certainly true. And there's impact by some of the federal government shutdown, the delays that some of we've had, the lateness, staffing. Those things all contribute to how quickly we get the things we're accustomed to, how consistent we can be with the information we put out. And I think that's the part that has also sort of been a double-edged sword a little bit in the trust and credibility of the data, when I think the reality is the sort of trust and credibility issue is elsewhere. The data is good, but the timeliness, the amount of that, and then what we're able to do with it has been impacted for sure. And our team has been very proactive in that, and really trying to let folks know at the state level, we do have a gold standard around our work, around the information we put out, and being able to paint that picture, but also to David's good point about bring visibility and credibility to it by explaining what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why it matters, and why they can depend on it.
So each state has its own program, UI program, and it varies state by state. Are some states better in terms of the quality and transparency, timeliness of the information that they provide compared to other states?
I mean, I think that's possible, but I think all of the states that I work with, and I see all of them, the teams that do that work nationally have the same integrity and credibility that the state of Washington has. So their ability, when I say that, the ability to like put something out timely could be based on a lot of things, staffing or otherwise. So, I mean, I don't monitor all of the other states, but I work with all the states in our national association, and our labor market experts are so dedicated to this work that there's that same caliber of quality nationally and that same commitment to making sure that the residents in all of our states have good information and have systems with integrity.
So every Thursday morning, I look at the UI numbers when they come out. And we're going to come back to this because there's other issues with the UI data. And I don't mean this in any kind of nefarious sense. I mean, you know, but should I put the same weight on the data I'm getting from each of the states? Are the quality is as good as the next?
Yeah.
Or should I be down weighting some states? And obviously Washington's the gold standard, so.
Well, right, because I said it, so it's true. It's like the internet, 100% certain of that. What I would say is there is consistent quality nationally, and I think the unemployment insurance number is important, and it's one number when you look at the economic system. The unemployment number doesn't tell you how many people are taking jobs that are really underemploying them. It doesn't show you big swaths of folks that might not be participating in the unemployment insurance system. And that gig economy is growing, and so there's a lot of other things in addition to that unemployment rate that are really important. And I will just say, in our state, one of the things that we're seeing is we're seeing the duration of unemployment's longer. So people, when they're losing their jobs, you know, that number of ongoing claims is way up. But our unemployment rate has stayed fairly low, and our initial claims hasn't jumped considerably, even though we know economically things are really shifting in our state. So I think that's an important number. I'm glad you look at it every week. I look at those numbers too.
No, I'm all over that data.
I know. Well, that's good. You're one. Yeah, that is fantastic. It's super critical. And there's a whole broader picture that I think is important too. But I think states do a good job with their unemployment rates, and those numbers are accurate nationally.
And just so you know, I think the UI data at this point in time are probably the most important statistic to watch to gauge how the economy is doing, because that goes to layoffs, and that's the firewall between the economy we have and an economic downturn and recession.
Yes,
so
that is one of the first indicators for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Agreed.
But I'm going to come back to you because I'm going to push back on this a little bit.
I can't wait.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, Chris, what do you think? How big a deal is the issues around economic data quality and timeliness?
So I'm going to probably be the only one in history to channel Donald Rumsfeld and then go straight to Jay Powell. But, I mean, you go to policy with the data.
Did you ask Jay if you could do that?
We'll find out later.
Okay.
But you go to policy with the data.
Chris, you might want to take the mic off the stand.
You kind of, you do policy with the data you have, not the data you want, not the data you really wish you had in a couple weeks from now or a couple years from now. So that's the situation we're all in. And it's really easy to sit and say we'd like to have, you know, this data series be a little longer, this response rate to be a little bit higher, but I think you have to keep in mind We actually have a lot of data, and we have enough data to do our jobs. And so with the data we get, the Federal Reserve can do our job, and that's pretty much a direct quote from Jay Powell. Now, I think it's important to think that we are also accustomed to having this gold standard of data in this country. We have the data that we can look back, we see revisions, there's clear methodology, and that, is something that we've become accustomed to, but is also paramount to keep kind of trying to push forward. This is not just good for policy, this is good for businesses, this is good for financial institutions, this is good for the public. And trying to maintain that sort of gold standard, I think, is the most important issue that we're gonna have going forward. And if there's sort of a fear, it could be a fear of balkanization, that there's different data sources that are higher quality that not everybody has access to. But one of the things, and I think is really important about the audience here, is really thinking about this from the state level. States have always been the testing ground for different strategies and different policies and different ways of approaching things. And it's a great way of finding out what works. And at the state level, I mean, you guys are also partners with the federal government in providing data. You're partners in consuming data. You're partners in understanding, maybe some cost sharing. You're also partners in communicating the statistics that either you produce or jointly produce to the population. So if we kind of harken back to David's point earlier about, there might be some fundamental lack of trust that's leading to lower response rates, then that communication that happens at the state and local level is even more important right now, because it's that trust that we build that might help businesses more participate in the collection of these data and statistics. We're going to get to some additional questions later about maybe different directions for collecting statistics, but at least in the current environment, that trust is very important to maintain, and the communication that happens at the local level in some cases is more important than happens at the national level, even though the statistics in some cases are published at the federal level.
So I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight if I don't make one more point. I said I was absolutely convinced there's been no compromise of the integrity of the federal statistical system. The point I want to make is that trust is earned. You have to earn that trust. You have to re-earn that trust every day of the week, 7 days a week. And communication is absolutely central to that. In my view, there have been some significant communication errors lately at the federal level. And that has allowed a lack of trust to creep in. You have to resist the temptation to say, I know that my Python code is fine. I know that the tables were compiled and fact-checked. I know that the press release was accurate. You have to remember there's an audience out there that doesn't actually read Table 4.3 and the technical appendix there too. You have to communicate why did you do what you did, and do it in a way that will be compelling and comprehensible to non-specialist members of your audience. That is where in my view, I think some of the failure has occurred lately. I want to be clear, it's not a concern about the numbers, but it is an essential part of the overall enterprise of being leaders of important statistical agencies. You have to communicate compellingly and convincingly in a way that makes sense to people.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the panel. But before I do that, I want to get you on the record. So the question is, how big a deal is the apparent seeming weakening in the quality and timeliness of economic data? 0 to 10. 0, not a problem. 10, hair on fire. Chris, what would you say?
I think it's really hard to put a number on that because there's so many different.
Spoken like a true economist.
I'm going to stick with I can't put a number on that.
Okay, Cami?
I'm going to give it a 7 because you're going to make me say a number, I can tell.
7.
Yeah.
Yes. I can't force you to do anything. And David?
I'm just going to say, you know, for me, hair on fire is kind of an ethereal concept.
You can tell these two guys were at the Federal Reserve, right? Yeah, yeah. I would have answered that question. I'd say 7 or 8. I'd be with Cami. I think, you know, there's reasons to be concerned. Here's where I'm going to push back. Look, you know, let's talk about the labor market data and the inflation data, because that's obviously top of mind for the Federal Reserve. You got a dual mandate, low stable inflation, full employment. These are the most important statistics. And you look at the data we've been getting on the jobs front, we get in these seemingly very large revisions, both, you know, monthly revisions and benchmark revisions. And it, you know, raises some eyebrows, some concerns. It certainly raised the ire of the President of the United States. He fired the former BLS commissioner over the size of the revision. And then you look at the inflation data, and I'm not saying anyone's putting any fingers on any scale, but you know, we had a government shutdown, and that messed with the data. The CPI inflation rate is lower than it otherwise would be because of the gap in reporting, because there was no survey. And there's a lot of reasons to be nervous beyond response rates. I mean, budgets have been cut. Staffing has been significantly cut. I mean, even in the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, there's a lot more imputed data because they're not going surveying, so they need to fill in the squares, and they're imputing. And you know, I don't know, that can't be good. That can't be good over time. So it just feels like to me, it's not hair on fire. Hair on fire would be someone's playing with the data. I concur with you, but we should be on high alert here. Anybody, Chris, you want to react to that?
So I'll start. I'll kind of go through the employment data and then talk about the prices data.
Chris, why don't you move the mic over in front of you?
David used to be my division director, so
This is all making sense.
Yes, sir.
I'm still following his lead. The employment data is a victim of its own success in some ways, and I think we need to keep this in mind. There's, you know, when you think about and I'm thinking about the employment statistics, not the unemployment rate, so the establishment survey. The establishment survey concurrently seasonally adjusts, goes through revisions as additional data is collected, and then goes through a benchmark revision. This might be the only source of data that we see with this importance that goes through this sort of tenor of revisions and cycles and continually gets improved and updated. And the reason it gets updated is because they actually have the benchmarking data from the QCEW to use that for. And we see it in real time, and we know that the payroll employment is one of the most important data sources that we pay attention to in this economy. You know, there's a great paper by Decker, a new MBR paper, that sort of tries to compare the revisions to the employment data to some of the other national statistics, let's say GDP. And you'll actually see larger revisions in some of the NIPA data than you see employment. And the reason we don't talk about that is it doesn't happen for a few years, hence the publication date. It doesn't happen in sort of the same frequency in which we see it. So in some ways, yes, we have seen one of the largest revisions due to the 2025 March benchmark revision. Most of this is due to like a sample difference between the QCEW and the sample that's collected in the CES. Seen one of the largest ones since 2009. Is it something we should pay attention to and put like importance on? Yes. Is it say that the quality of statistics has hit this low level that we might not be able to trust it? And the answer to that would be no, particularly when you think about those confidence intervals relative to other data we look at. It's just the case that we really care about this data and we're focused on it right now, and it's sending signals that we need to be paying attention to. For the prices data, yes, during the government shutdown, there was some late collections, some bi-monthly sampling was put off, and some of the in-data was imputed. But I think maybe another point to think about is that understanding these possible biases and being able to look through them is more important than putting too much weight on those biases in and of themselves. So if you have the quality of staff, that actually can help you understand what the problems are due to the shutdown, which is in some ways just an exogenous shock to data collection, then you can see through those and be able to understand what the implications are. I would say that overall, and I'll stop here, that one of the most important resources the states have, the federal level has, that these statistical agencies have, is the workers in these institutions. It's the accumulated knowledge that we have in these institutions over time. It's that skill set. It's the person who's been there 30 years who understands Table 3B, line 27, that's going to be able to continue.
Table 4.
It's also 3B, I hear.
Oh, okay.
But it's
We've got
that
'em
sort of
both
skill
covered.
set that we need to keep focusing on so that we can continue to have these agencies function in a way and pass that knowledge on to the next generation, let's say, of statistical employees and workers that are going to be able to continue publishing gold standard statistics.
Cami, I'm going to come back to you because I got a special question for you. And I know David's got a view on this. So, David, you want to weigh in on this question of what's behind all this?
Actually, the keynote speaker mentioned one thing that resonated with me, and that is having the right metric.
Yeah.
Maybe if you haven't inspected Table 4.2, line B, 37, you're not aware, perhaps, that it's absolutely correct that the published response rate to the establishment survey that Chris was talking about has trended down since about 2015. You know what is also true? The month-to-month revisions have not trended larger. That's a puzzle. It is the case that we've had some large annual benchmark revisions, and that might be an issue for concern. But there is a disjunction between the decline in the measured response rate and the month-to-month revisions, which have not gotten larger. And what I've been wondering is whether we have an inaccurate metric. And to maybe dispel a little bit of the fog in my comment that might be in your mind right now, what the heck am I talking about? Well, it turns out those response rates are not size-weighted. So Wilcox's auto repair garage has 3 mechanics in it, and I didn't respond. That weighs, as I understand it, just as heavily in that response metric as Zandi's Megabucks Corp., which has 1,000 employees at the one establishment that's drawn into the sample, and Mark has made a point of telling his compliance officer, I want you to report on a timely manner. Zandi's Megabucks and Wilcox's auto repair weigh equally. Maybe that's the answer, but I wanted to mention it partly because it's another way of saying it's a puzzle to me that we haven't seen the deterioration in the monthly employment survey, but it also drives home the importance of making sure you have the right metric that's fit for purpose.
So Ahu, we're running out of time. We have 10 more minutes? Okay. No, you can't ask a question, sorry. No, go ahead, ask your question. Is this a good question?
I hope so.
Okay.
Because I feel the title of this presentation is Practitioner Perspectives on Trust, Capacity, and Disruption. I feel I have to represent the leadership of the National Center for Education Statistics. The 3rd largest statistical agency was wiped off the map. And the labor commissioner was wiped off. My commissioner was wiped off. I was on the leadership team. And I am very concerned about the state of statistics. And I understand that it's just one perspective that's on the panel. These are economists. But I'm looking at the whole statistical system. And just imagine if in one day BLS was wiped off and they said, oh, we can outsource this or move everything to census. So I just want to put that perspective out there and get your feedback, because it's not that the data are good, because even the data coming out from NCS right now are decent, even though the studies have been canceled. So I have confidence in the quality of data, but I'm concerned from a trust perspective and like what's happening to challenge the trust from what's coming in on the staffing, the cuts, and what's happening in the system.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Can I ask, on 0 to 10, what would you rate your level of concern? I said 7-8. Cami said 7-8.
Well, it's a balance. I'll do a 5. I'll do right in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Because the data coming out, like I'm not concerned. What's being released, I'm not concerned about yet.
Right.
What I am concerned about is to be able to continue the studies. I think what's going to happen at NCES in the next 1 to 2 years is the machine, they're keeping the lights on. You have 11 staff members.
Right.
They're keeping things running that we started before. There are no new contracts coming out, no new studies being, so things are going to start falling apart over time, and they're going to have to find things out. So
5 now, direction of travel, you're concerned. Yeah, thank you.
And
I appreciate
we have
that. Thanks very much. Thank you. I want to come back to AI also, but before I do that, Cami, let me come back to you on the UI program, because here, the concern I have, and as I said, I'm a careful consumer of that data, particularly at this point in time in the business cycle, is that it's not representing the reality of what's going on. That not because of any, again, nothing nefarious. It's just, you're very transparent in methodology and you're doing what you've always done. But the program, because of change in eligibility rules, changes in the amount of compensation people get when they file for UI. You mentioned gig workers, maybe layoffs in the tech sector. These people are highly paid. In the financial services sector, highly paid. It's not immediately worth it for them to go out. So if I'm using this as a real-time signal, should I be using it as a real-time signal? I see 205,000. Is that, should I take that at face value?
I mean, I think it is a signal, and I think a lot of the things that you just described, I would say is true. And I think in our state, it's reflective of that number is one part of it. And across the nation, to your earlier question, different states have different components that drive their overall program and those parts and pieces of what that way, what they get paid, that weekly benefit, et cetera. That does all play in. So there is a whole complex system of things we look at. And I'll just give you an example. I was recently at something with our governor, and he was doing something on tariffs, and it happened to be held at a food bank. And we were talking to the food bank, and they use unemployment rate as one of the sort of indicators and measures. But it's been wildly off for them. They're seeing much more people come in and need supports because even though they're employed, the cost of things alongside of what sorts of jobs they're able to get when they're laid off are wholly different. And so it doesn't mean that economically they're well off right now because our unemployment rate might be at a certain spot. Washington State does have a giant tech sector. We've had a lot of tech layoffs, and what we know about high wage earners is that they are more likely to stay employed, and once unemployed, it is more difficult to find a job that's either commensurate with their wages or is the work that they do. And so that all of those things have an impact. So I wouldn't disagree with you. It's not so much the quality of the data. I think it's just the landscape right now and everything that's happening economically for folks of all economic ranges right now.
I think this highlights the point the participant was making, though, that things change. The world changes, the economy changes, and if we don't have the budget and the people to be able to change our statistical techniques and methodologies and collect that information in the way that's necessary to get to the underlying noise, we get more signal than noise, we got a problem. And it's not a cliff event, it's a corrosive. We wake up 10 years from ago, we go, oh my God, look what happened. You know, we just can't see what's going on. So I think that, Chris, you wanted to say something?
I just to actually kind of touch on that question and kind of dovetail here a bit, I do think that there is an existential question about statistics collection and the current methodologies that we have right now in this country and across the world. And it's not just public sector data collection, it's private companies that are collecting data that are also seeing lower response rates. You know, we need to think about how to pivot into a new world in which you don't have people answering the phone. You don't have people, you know, responding to paper surveys that are being sent out. And, you know, this is, again, goes back to my states are the best thing for test beds for new technology and kind of new ideas, is that you have the ability to kind of leverage private payroll data. There is organizations out there, there are large-scale projects like Emory and that are trying to kind of combine public sector data with private sector data and try to come up with new ways of collecting that information. Like the Australian Bureau of Statistics actually gets all their payroll data through their treasury and then creates statistics from that. There probably are ways at the state level of redoing or rethinking how you collect and initiate data with some of these private organizations to lower the burden on firms. I would love to know, and I'm sure this exists, is just like a count of how many different surveys a firm will respond to or an establishment will respond to, and think about ways of making that collection more efficient so that, you know, maybe the payroll provider provides that information and does the taxes and eliminates that burden all at the same time with some type of joint relationship or federal legislation or state legislation to make that easier. But, you know, my responses on whether or not the quality is good to do policy is different than what I think is happening with the sort of confluence of factors that some may be trust and some may be technology-based that are leading to us to have to make some big decisions about statistic collection in the future.
Cami, did you want to say something? No?
Nope, I'm
Okay.
good.
So we're running out of time.
Allison's about to give you the hook.
Mark,
I thought I had till 10 after, no?
Well, we do have one additional question, so I want to make sure we.
Okay, we'll take the question and we'll call it what would we
David
call it, a
has
panel? Oh, David, go ahead.
why don't
See,
we
it's
have our
a good
question?
question,
But I do
okay.
want to get in a word.
I'm not a very good moderator. I lost complete control.
Go ahead.
You're great.
Go ahead, please. I have to figure out the mic, too.
Go ahead,
You
David.
can hear me?
Okay, I just wanted to illuminate a little further where I stand on my level of concern. I'm probably at an 8 or 9.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Wait, it's going up as we talk more.
Let me give me just a second to explain what I mean by that. I'm going to use an analogy to the weather situation. I look at the radar all the time. The storm clouds look really bad to me. It looks like a line of red thunderstorms coming our direction. What I do not have evidence of right now is that it's raining at this moment. That's the distinction that I'm trying to make. Is there reason for concern? You bet there is deep reason for concern. There are staffing cuts. There is rhetorical assault. There is budget underfunding. All of that has my stomach in a knot. I don't have the goods, the receipts to deliver that the numbers today have been distorted. And I also want to underscore the importance of Chris's point. We absolutely, urgently need to be focused on the job of creating the statistical system of 2040 that isn't going to rely on traditional survey methods. And I'm afraid that one of the costs of the current Sturm and Drang is that we'll lose our focus. We won't keep our eye on that critically important objective, and we won't fund the investments today that will be required to enable that.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Then you
Hello,
wanted to hear. Go ahead.
Hello. You can all hear me. Great. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for a really informative panel and passionate advocacy on behalf of all of us and all of you that represent the federal statistical system. I run research in the great state of New Jersey, research operations. Woo! Hello. and serve as chair on a federal, well, albeit moribund, federal advisory council on labor market information to the Secretary of Labor. So this question I'm going to ask you is a bit more about, that's more endemic and not so much about emerging trends. I think, Chris, you mentioned in one of your list of items that we had to talk about, you mentioned cost allocation. And I think there's just simply not enough invested in data and analytical infrastructure at the federal or at the state level. I think it's a really endemic problem, and it's not one that caused this, but it certainly is not going to help this problem. So I see our former BLS commissioner here. Shout out to you, and many of my counterparts in the other states. Can I ask you to clap your hands if you agree with me that there's not enough money for us to invest in our data infrastructure or analytical infrastructure? So I'm not saying money is going to solve our problems, not all of our problems. It certainly will help. But there's not just enough, not just not enough, but it's not enough and not allocated in such a way for us to be able to respond to the kind of questions that and issues that you're raising. We can't do long-term planning because our budgets are year after year or single-year budgets, and we're not flexible enough, or we can't be flexible or adaptable enough to respond to these kind of emerging trends. So we get, an average of the last 3 years' budget, but that doesn't really reflect what we need to do this year. So here, I'm going to get to my question. So what ideas or strategies can you share, short of legislative action, which none of us can do much about, but if you want to talk a little bit about legislative action, happy to hear your thoughts. But what ideas or strategies can you share that might help us address this issue of fundamental underinvestment in data infrastructure?
That's a really deep question, and we're not going to be able to do justice because we just literally don't have time.
But can I still hear some ideas?
Maybe we'll do a lightning round, if that's okay.
Yeah, lightning round, please.
Lightning round. Go ahead, Chris.
So the thing that I'm always confused about is that when we have states pitching their place, their geographic location as good for business, they talk about things like regulation, they talk about roads, they talk about taxes. Statistics provided by the state should be in that list. And that's a great way of pitching it because that helps businesses be dynamic and that helps them to respond to changing economic conditions.
Great, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, Cami.
Yeah, I share your concern, and I would just say from a state perspective, I think we have really worked hard to try to do a little bit of what Chris has talked about to show our value and to demonstrate why what we do is so critical to the state and our system, so that we can get investment beyond whatever federal dollars. And we do invest as a state well above beyond that because it's just a critical part of the function that we have and role that we have.
Bring us home, David.
Communicate relentlessly. Never miss the opportunity to make the case. Recognize that every moment is a chance to connect with somebody, perhaps in unexpected ways. Maybe there's a state legislator in the audience. Maybe there is somebody who knows a state legislator. Secondly, recognize that competence matters. Executing your job flawlessly 100% of the time, I've noticed as a former manager of human beings, is an unattainable standard. But every time there's a shortfall, that damages the case. So constant striving for perfection is essential. Communicate and build trust and be known for excellence. Those are a few of the things that I would do in an admittedly extremely difficult situation.
Let's thank the panel.
Well, I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that panel. Thank you. And I would highly encourage, I'm sure there's a million more questions that you have for them. So throughout today, tomorrow, please make sure to grab them and ask your questions and get their insight, their wealth of knowledge. Also, I don't know about you, but I definitely need a head break from all of this information. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break before we come back for our next panel. So please fill up water, do what you need to do, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.